Essam, it's been a very long, hot day in the sun here at the pyramids, but very worthwhile because we're getting a lot of background that's not only about Egyptian history and culture, but also about the Bible. And one fascinating collection of verses in Genesis 50, the very end of the first book of the Bible, it starts out with Joseph weeping over his father's death, Jacob. And then Joseph, who was at that point the vizier or the prime minister, you could say, of Egypt, directed the physicians in his service to embalm his father Israel, or Jacob. So the physicians embalmed him, taking a full 40 days, for that was the time required for embalming, and the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days. So tell us what on earth is going on here.
Mummification was important for Egyptian. Normal person have to mummify his body in order to keep the body in a good shape so the soul can recognize the body, merge, go for the eternal life. Nobles, they do the mummification in 45 days. Kings have to do it in 70 days because they have the money, they can get quality materials for embalming oil, and they can get high-experienced physicians to do the mummification.
Now, Essam, you told me that the pyramids are really basically tombs, but they were unfinished with just 70 days worth of work before.
The reason why there is 70 days for the kings to mummify in 70 days period, because within this 70 days, they finish the tomb. Because the tomb of the kings, they never finished it during their life. They wait until the last part of the tomb, which is the burial chamber, to be completed while they mummify the king in 70 days.
So before you say any more, one of the things I've loved hearing you say, because it sounds so biblical, is that for the Egyptians, the ancient Egyptians, the life after death was more important than this life, and they put their resources really more in terms of the future. And so even the homes that the palaces of the kings were nothing compared to their tombs. Is that right?
Ancient Egyptian, they believe that the most important and most eternal life is the life that will come after death. So they never care of the living housing. They were care of two things: temples to worship God, to do good deeds in the life, to get the blessing from the God in order to pass to the most eternal life, which is the tombs. So they were focusing of two things: temples and tombs.
Okay, so now we actually have two temples right here that lead up to that tomb.
This is for an example for one of the kings that have two temples: the mummification temple and then the funeral temple. And the funeral temple is linked to the tomb. There is a causeway.
So once that large ramp?
Yeah, once they're done with the mummification, then they start for the funeral, and then they go with the causeway all the way for the funeral process, all the way to the top of the burial place.
So the temple for mummification, is it active during the king's life, or is it only there
they
for
just made it for the occasion of the mummification for the king, the same thing for the funeral.
Same thing for this. Why do we have a sphinx right here?
The sphinx right here, this is when they were building the second pyramid. They found a huge big Mother Nature rock. They couldn't move it until the king come over and say, let's sculpture it into the shape of the Sepshisanch, which is the body of a lion and a face of a human being, and he made himself as a human being that is on the body of the lion. So they give message for two things: the power of the lion and the wisdom of the human being. Ended up that it's facing east, as it's like like the guardian of the necropolis, of the whole necropolis of Giza.
Well, we'll want to talk some more about composite animal figures and even animal and human figures a little later, because that also has some resonance when we read the Bible with some different figures that we meet from Genesis to Ezekiel and on into Revelation.
When we go further south, we will see how the animals are the gods. They use the animals as a figure for the god.
So that's going to prompt some questions we have about the theology of ancient Egypt.
Yes.
Not only the worship of the kings, but how gods were in the form of different figures, and how they could even change forms and be worshipped in different forms.
Exactly.
Good. Well, we have more to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's great.